However, right now, he no longer had the ability to fight. If he lost his value, wouldn't it be a waste to keep that powerful energy? He might as well be used as nourishment to revive Majin Buu. At this moment, he made a decision and sighed in his heart. Fortunately, Vegeta defeated Dabura in 2 or 3 moves. The energy in his body had basically not been lost. It should be enough to break the seal of Majin Buu. In fact, Babidi did not have absolute confidence to make Majin Buu listen to his orders, but he had absolute control over Dabura. Therefore, he had always been reluctant to sacrifice Dabura. After all, a slightly weaker but absolutely obedient subordinate was better than a powerful but disobedient subordinate. Moreover, he believed that as long as he was given enough time, he would definitely be able to think of a way to completely control Majin Buu. There's no other way. As long as Majin Buu can wake up, the one who will feel fear will be old Kai. Lord Babidi. Majin Buu, who did not know his miserable fate, woke up from a short coma. He thought that Lord Babidi had saved him at the critical moment and was extremely grateful to Babidi. Babidi let out a sinister laugh. He suddenly held up the energy absorption device with both hands and aimed the small mouth at Dabura. Soon, Dabura felt the energy in his body rapidly draining away, and his expression became flustered. Lord Babidi. Be obedient and become nourishment for the resurrection of Majin Buu. As Majin Buu fell, the energy absorption device quickly turned halfway. Just a little more energy to break the seal of Majin Buu is enough. Babidi absorbed the energy without any restraint. Dabura's skin began to dry and turn white, but the probe needle only moved to 2/3 of its original position. Hua! A magic was thrown down, and Dabura's body began to slowly decompose. The energy probe began to slowly turn again. This Babidi really did it without wasting a single bit. Boom! 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 Ayaka and the others charged forward. Layer after layer, the ship shook violently. After meeting the universe person Pui Pui and Yekan, Son Goku was surprised to find that Pui Pui looked very similar to the appearance of the second transformation of Frieza. Ayaka wondered if this universe person Pui Pui had the blood of the frozen race. He looked too similar. After that, Son Goten and Iam volunteered to rush forward and turned into Super Saiyan 2, quickly dealing with Pui Pui and Yekan. It's a complete devastation. Old Kai shook his head, feeling sad for their opponents. Ever since he met these Saiyan people, he had been surprised countless times and gradually became numb. After entering the spaceship, Jellet had been tense. He said, the Super Saiyan of the past has never been that strong. Just a little bit more and Majin Buu will be revived. As he absorbed the energy, Babidi stared at the energy probe. Finally, when Dabura was completely turned into ashes, the energy absorption device reached its peak. It's full. The energy to break the seal is full. Majin Buu is about to be resurrected. Babidi shouted excitedly. At this time, the spaceship trembled and a large hole was broken in the ceiling. Ayaka and Old Kai descended from the hole and saw Babidi injecting energy into the egg of Majin Buu. The circle of sand-shaped holes around the egg constantly spewed steam. Crap, Majin Buu is removing the seal. Old Kai shouted in shock. Kamehameha. Son Goku stepped forward and raised his arms. A brilliant energy wave shot out and hit the giant egg of Majin Buu. With a loud bang, the giant egg was bounced out and the entire universe ship exploded. Too impatient. Hongya shouted and hurriedly used her ki to protect her body as she rushed out of the spaceship. Rumble. The earth swelled up in a huge circle. A loud explosion resounded through the sky. Smoke and sand covered their vision, and the loose sand was burned by the terrifying energy in the explosion. Accompanied by a few rings of powerful shock waves, the violent energy mixed with a deafening roar swept out. The chaotic energy calmed down, and the sky regained its tranquility. However, there was a faint smell of smoke in the air. Not far away, the two spherical eggshell was buried under the sand, and it was empty. Empty. Kibito was shocked. Could it be that because of the long seal, Majin Buu has dried up? Old Kai frowned. Would Majin Buu, who once threatened the entire universe, really die because of the long seal? He could not agree with this idea. He looked around, but he did not see any trace of Babidi. He asked, "Where is that fellow Babidi? He should have died in the explosion just now." Hearing this answer, old Kai felt very speechless. Babidi's life was too worthless. Could it be that without Dabber's protection, he could not even avoid a small explosion? But then again, Son Goku's Kamehameha was indeed a bit powerful. Even he felt his heart palpitate. Fortunately, Majin Buu had not been resurrected successfully. Dabura and Babidi had both died. This was the best outcome that he had expected. Just as he felt a heavy burden being lifted from his shoulder and wanted to heave a sigh of relief, he saw Ayaka looking up at the sky. What was there to see in the sky? Old Kai looked up in confusion. A black cloud hovered in the air and slowly gathered, finally forming the shape of a human. His expression suddenly changed. What a strong aura! Son Goku raised his head, a look of shock on his face. Vegeta frowned, his expression a little grave. Is this aura of Majin Buu? As expected, it cannot be underestimated. Ayaka, Hongya, Son Goku, and Babidi looked on calmly, nodding their heads one after another. This aura is comparable to that of Son Goku. Bang! A pink and plump figure appeared in the air and landed on the ground with a thud. Then, he looked left and right. He narrowed his eyes and let out a breath. He laughed like a harmless, "Ha." Old Kai stepped forward. Everyone, be careful. He is Majin Buu. Back down. Ayaka shouted. He quickly pulled Old Kai to the side and leaped up. Son Goku, Hongya, and Bardock were not slow either. Seeing that Ayaka had stepped forward, they also followed. The four of them tightly surrounded Majin Buu in the middle. Four balls of energy erupted. 3 of them shone with golden light. Other than Ayaka, who was in a state of training, Son Goku, Hongya, and Bardock had all transformed into Super Saiyan 3. What a terrifying aura! Son Goten was shocked. The pressure that seemed to come from the depths of his soul was suffocating. Ayam's beautiful eyes were full of light as she looked at them with excitement. This is Super Saiyan 3. He was surpassed by Kakarot again, but I will soon reach it. Vegeta was not particularly surprised. He had already touched the realm of Super Saiyan 3. If he was given a little more time, he could break through at any time. This was the first time Old Kai had witnessed such a powerful force. He was stunned. Unbelievable. This is their strongest strength. They are even more terrifying than Majin Buu. After 4 super powerful warriors appeared beside him, Majin Buu finally became alert. He put his hands on his hips and continued to laugh foolishly. Vegeta watched for a while and was ready to join in the fun. He flew over and said, "Kakarot, I can't give Majin Buu to you." However, although he said that, he did not really take half a step out of the pool, but stopped in a circle outside. The situation had become clear and happy. In the middle was the silly-looking Majin Buu. The 4 Super Saiyan 3, Ayaka, Hongya, Son Goku, and Bardock, were outside. The ones outside were Vegeta, Son Goku, and Ayam at the peak of the second super competition. After them were Launch, Lancey, Android 17, and Android 18, who were as strong as Super Perfect Cell. Old Kai and Kibito were already excluded. No matter how you looked at it, Majin Buu would be very tragic. Majin Buu, do you want to obediently surrender? Ayaka asked with a relaxed expression. The fat Majin Buu had a big fat belly, and the small holes on his body were constantly spewing steam. Suddenly, Majin Buu made a face at them. "You bunch of bad people, I won't fight with you." Hearing Majin Buu's words, Ayaka immediately felt at a loss of whether to laugh or cry. Although Majin Buu looked very chubby and simple, he would never be soft-hearted when killing people. Of course, fatty Majin Buu's brain was also a problem. Who knew if he was acting cute or had other plans this time? She was very clear that the current Majin Buu should be very angry, so the possibility of acting cute was very low. The reason why he said this was more because there were many people on his side and the strength had the upper hand. If there weren't so many powerful people surrounding him to make him a little hesitant, Majin Buu in his angry state would not say half a word to her, and he would kill the whole world. Killing was a common characteristic of Majin. Every time Majin appeared, it would bring a bloody rain to the universe. He was somewhat different from the god of destruction. Although the god of destruction was also a little moody, he was actually clear in his bones. He knew what his behavior meant and had enough rationality to restrain it. As an opponent, he had to be strong, and as a friend, he could be weak. The god of destruction held a playful mentality. When he really attacked, it was either when old Kai was powerless, he would clean up the mess, or when the world reached the threshold of the master of the laws of destruction and was activated. The god of destruction was in a state of deep sleep most of the time, and once it woke up, it would be the time to execute destruction. Majin Buu was different. Its existence was a lumps that was produced by the world itself. When a lumps was cleared, it would develop a new lumps after a long period of development. Assuming that the world had the ability to clean itself, then old Kai was the guardian. Generally, when the particularly powerful Majin Buu descended, even old Kai was helpless. It was when God of Destruction would appear. Although Majin of this generation, Buu, had become Fat Buu due to the influence of old Kai, and the character of Fat Buu was much better than the ancient Majin, he was also temperamental and would start a massacre because of a small matter. Is this still Majin Buu in my impression? After Majin Buu, old Kai had a serious expression on his face. In his mind, he was shocked by the scene of the death of several other old Kai. He felt a chill in his heart and quickly shouted, "Majin Buu is an extremely evil guy. Everyone must not be confused by his flowery words." Ayaka knew that what old Kai said was not completely right, but she was too lazy to care about it. She worked together with several Super Saiyan of the three realms to force Majin Buu further. Sure enough, when Majin Buu saw that his words had no effect at all, his veins suddenly surged and his body was burning. The small holes all over his body emitted hot steam with a woo sound. His simple and honest face immediately darkened, and his eyes turned into crescent moons. "What do you mean by flowery words?" The corner of Majin Buu's mouth trembled, and he clenched his fists tightly. He looked very angry, and the small hole in his head suddenly spewed out a large amount of steam. "Ah, I'm so angry. I'm going to turn all of you into chocolate and eat you." As soon as he lowered his head, his pink tentacles lit up with a ray of light. Whoa! Strange lightning spread out in all directions. Ayaka immediately shouted, "Back off, don't get hit by the magic on his head." When Son Goku and the others heard this, out of trust in Ayaka, they quickly retreated, avoiding the magic of Majin Buu. Seeing that their magic had not been played, Majin Buu's face swelled up again. He still wanted to use magic, but Ayaka did not give him a chance. Her body swayed, and the tip of her foot stepped on the air a few times. With two bangs, her body suddenly accelerated, and she arrived in front of Majin Buu in a flash of lightning. Majin Buu opened his mouth in disbelief. Then, he bent his arm and said, "Bang! Bang!" The tremendous force of 1,000 pounds was released. An extremely penetrating force pierced through the air and hit the stomach of Majin Buu. Majin Buu opened his mouth and let out a few low cries. His stomach was shaking and twisting like jelly. It was completely caved in by the force of the punch. The skin on his back was also very elastic and extended several meters. Whoosh! Time seemed to have slowed down all of a sudden. Majin Buu's body bounced back and flew straight like a cannonball. Son Goku seized the opportunity. After Ayaka sent Majin Buu flying, he jumped in front of Majin Buu. He cupped his fists and hit Majin Buu heavily from the back like a volleyball. How can I be missing? Hongya smiled indifferently and took the sphere that Son Goku had sent over to continue to ravage Majin Buu. With that, Majin Buu was completely eliminated. So powerful, to actually beat Majin Buu to the point where he could not retaliate at all. Old Kai was both surprised and delighted as he watched Majin Buu being beaten up like a volleyball, wishing that he could go up and take a few shots himself, but his strength was limited, so he could only watch enviously from the side. In fact, Fat Buu was not strong. In the original work, Son Goku could defeat him when he became Super Saiyan 3. It was just that at that time, Son Goku was a dead person. He felt that he should not interfere in the affairs of the human world, so he handed over the task of defeating Majin Buu to Son Goten and Trunks. And Goten did not disappoint the public, and he once completely crushed Skinny Buu. If not for the fact that Skinny Buu later used a trick to devour Goten, the outcome would really be uncertain. Ayaka estimated that Fat Buu's current ability was only at the lowest point of Beyond 3, so he naturally could not block for Super 3 continuous attacks. Kamehameha. A straight blue energy wave streaked across the sky. The energy wave that contained powerful energy was like 10,000 stampeding horses. It smashed into Majin Buu's body like a hot knife through butter. Immediately, it created a huge hole in Majin Buu's body. With a poochie sound, Majin Buu fell to the ground. His body bounced a few times. His round head became uneven. His clothes were wrinkled and there was a big hole in his chest. He looked very pitiful. Woo! His pink skin continued to move, thump. With a flick of his body, the large hole in his chest disappeared. Ayaka was lightly floating 4 to 5 meters above the ground. She leisurely supported his 2 arms with 1 foot and held them in front of his chest. The breeze blew against a few strands of sparse hair by his ears. Son Goku, Hongya, and Bardock stopped not far away. Their bodies were blazing with flames, flashing with golden light. Hee, you recovered so quickly. In the end, you still consumed some energy. Majin Buu's crescent moon-like eyes had narrowed into a line. The veins on both sides of his eyes were constantly surging. Io, it's a bit painful. You bastards, I don't want to do it anymore. He opened his hands, and a dazzling light lit up. A destructive energy suddenly burst out. Not good, Majin Buu is in a hurry. Sensing the powerful energy released by Majin Buu, Ayaka's face changed, and she was speechless. This Majin Buu couldn't take the blow. She didn't have time to think about it. She subconsciously used her ki to create a protective shield. Son Goku and Vegeta also changed their expressions, and they hid to the side to protect themselves. Rumble. The violent wind raged, and terrifying energy spread out in an instant. A huge solar flare rose up on the continent. The rotation of the Earth was affected by this, and it paused for a moment. With this as a disturbance, disaster broke out all over the world. If one stood in the solar system and looked at the Earth, one could clearly see a huge solar flare on the side of the Earth. The lookout of the heaven realm shook continuously, and the body of Korin Tower below was affected by the energy in the distance. The cracks were cracked and almost broke. On the lookout, Krillin hugged his head and bowed to the ground, shouting in horror, "What kind of monster is Ayaka dealing with? Just the pressure is about to crush the lookout." To be able to suppress such a strong guy to such an extent, the strength of Goku and the others is terrifying. Finally, the terrifying energy dispersed. When the dust settled and their vision returned, Krillin and the others immediately looked down through the lookout. However, everyone was stunned by the scene in front of them. A huge explosion pit with a diameter of 10,000 meters came into view. At the bottom of the deep and bottomless cave, they could faintly see some dark red liquid flowing. Hiss, the gas coming out must have a pungent smell of sulfur. Standing on the temple, the whole continent appeared a scorched yellow desert. The area around the explosion pit had become a scene of hell on Earth. Fortunately, Ayaka modified the Earth. Otherwise, with the explosion just now, the Earth would become cosmic dust. Krillin clutched his chest in relief. Yamcha and Tien Shinhan nodded in agreement. Then, they held their breaths and continued to observe the situation of Majin Buu. Pop. The head of Majin Buu poked out from the yellow sand. He looked left and right but did not see anyone else. Then, he jumped out happily. After releasing such a large amount of energy, Majin Buu also wiped his sweat. Hee, you want to bully me? This time, those guys are all finished. Majin Buu curled his lips and laughed. The strength of those guys almost scared him. But fortunately, he was smart. A big explosion had killed them. He twisted his body and bounced up and down. The fat on his body was like a balloon full of water, swaying up and down. Just as he was happy, suddenly a few breaths passed through. Majin Buu's dancing body suddenly stiffened. He bit the corner of his mouth and blinked his eyes. He looked up at the sky. The people he thought were killed were floating in the air. Oh! Majin Buu's mouth opened into an O shape. Ayaka teleported in front of Majin Buu and looked at him with a faint smile. Majin Buu, you also saw our strength. Do you think you can defeat us? Majin Buu curled his lips, crossed his arms over his chest, and snorted as he looked away. Seeing that he was unwilling to answer, Ayaka smiled. In the next second, a supreme divine might was released, and the expressions of everyone present changed. Vast, desolate, sacred, supreme. It was a divine might that made people submit willingly. This divine power. Old Kai opened his mouth in shock, unable to speak. For a moment, he actually had the illusion that Old Kai was alive. Then, he shook his head in confusion. He knew that Old Kai had been killed by Majin Buu. This divine might was not the aura of Old Kai he knew. What is going on? Old Kai frowned. It was also supreme and sacred, but it seemed to be more mysterious than Old Kai in his memory. Jellum was already dumbfounded. Lord Old Kai. This. Old Kai shook his head. He also did not know why such a mysterious power would appear on a mortal. Ancient Old Kai was still somewhat different from the current Old Kai. Old Kai was also misled by reality, so he naturally avoided that possibility in his heart. With 2 fingers on the sword, he gently pointed at Majin Buu. A strange ability was used. Majin Buu was shocked. His body floated up uncontrollably, spinning in the air. No matter how much he tried, he was unable to break free. After spinning at high speed for about half a minute, Ayaka withdrew her divine power. Majin Buu fell to the ground with a pu sound. Then, he staggered and stood up. His eyes turned into the shape of a mosquito. Countless stars were spinning in his mind, and he fell down again. Son Goku and Vegeta watched in shock as Ayaka played with Majin Buu. Although Majin Buu's power was not worth mentioning in his eyes, it would take a lot of effort to suppress him. He was definitely not as relaxed as Ayaka. Hongya and Ayam were surprised, but they puffed out their chests as if it were for a matter of course. Their faces were filled with pride. In their hearts, Ayaka had always been so awesome. In fact, the divine might that Old Kai had passed down to Ayaka was not considered strong, but with Ayaka's powerful energy as the backing, it was a combination of strong and powerful that had the effect of transforming something rotten into something magical. Moreover, the divine might itself was also a high-level thing. How is the ground slanted? Majin Buu finally stood up, and the young girl's cold voice sounded, how is it? Do you still want to resist? Majin Buu stood there with his head lowered. His eyes were closed, and his round head looked like he was deep in thought. Majin Buu did not have a high IQ. He did things based on his emotions. However, it did not mean that he was stupid. On the contrary, his combat talent was extremely high. He could learn many moves with a glance. Majin Buu, who thought he was smart but was actually a little silly, thought for a few minutes. He clapped his hands and suddenly realized how he could not defeat them. It turned out that he was not their match. Majin Buu touched his bald head and smiled. "I can't beat you guys, I won't fight anymore." Ayaka nodded lightly. Son Goku and the others also nodded in understanding and withdrew from the Super Saiyan state. Seeing that Son Goku and the others did not intend to fight against Majin Buu, Old Kai was extremely anxious. Majin Buu was the most unstable factor in the entire universe. Now that they had finally suppressed him, how could they let him go so easily? Son Goku, don't believe his words. Majin Buu is temperamental. His words cannot be counted. Lord Old Kai, this guy is a blockhead, but his strength is not bad. I want to keep him as an opponent. Son Goku said with difficulty. Hee, Kakarote's idea is not bad. With Majin Buu, I can become a Super Saiyan 3 faster. Vegeta was calculating. Old Kai was exasperated and speechless. These Saiyan people were too lawless. They did not have a general view of the situation at all. They were Majin Buu, who could destroy the universe. Kibito looked at Majin Buu, who was laughing foolishly. He sighed and said, "Lord Old Kai, let them be. With those Saiyan people, Majin Buu cannot make any waves." Old Kai thought for a moment, but could only nod helplessly. It was still a matter of strength. No matter how high his status and strength were, no one would listen to him. The matter of Majin Buu was temporarily announced. Soon, Ayaka and the others came to the temple one after another, and Majin Buu followed. After seeing the lookout, Majin Buu looked around curiously. He ran around the lookout excitedly, just like I am when he was a child. Except for Saiyan, Launch, Android 18 and the others, Krillin and the others were far away from him, afraid that they would be killed by him if they were not careful. Ayaka, is it okay to bring Majin Buu to the lookout? If he is stimulated, the temple will be destroyed. Krillin whispered to Ayaka. Yamcha also nodded worriedly. Majin Buu was in the lookout, and he did not dare to move around. Ayaka smiled coldly. Now that she thought about it, it was indeed a bit hasty to bring Majin Buu to the lookout, but if he was left alone on the ground, he did not know what would happen to him. If he was provoked by humans, he did not know what would happen. To be frank, the demons of this generation were very spineless. Majin Buu was an exception among the demons. He bullied the weak and feared the strong. He felt good about himself. Of course, this had a lot to do with merging with the Old Kai, and the demons of this generation had become so weak. Fatty Buu, who had fused with the Old Kai, was still considered naive. If you did not provoke him, he could be able to split up. However, the evil thoughts in his body were a problem. Ayaka began to wonder if he should let Fatty Buu get a little stimulated and release the Skinny Buu once and for all. At this time, Majin Buu was looking at the ice cream in Krillin's daughter Marin's hand with his fingers in his mouth, and his saliva was gushing out. Krillin was so scared that he quickly carried his daughter to another place. After obtaining the ice cream, Majin Buu licked it with satisfaction and laughed foolishly. Lord Old Kai, Majin Buu's character seems to be different from before. He might be affected by Old Kai. If he can continue like this, I will be relieved. But the other party is Majin Buu. Is it really that easy to change? The Old Kai leaned against the temple and looked at Majin Buu, feeling very uneasy. Old Kai, come with me to a place. Noticing that the Old Kai and his apprentice, Kibito, were standing in a corner, Ayaka rolled his eyes and said. In the Calls and Lonely Supreme Kai's planet, 3 planets that were like stars slowly moved in the space, radiating a soft light. Several nearby planets were wandering without a fixed trajectory, one stable and one chaotic, but forming a strange balance. Supreme Kai's planet, who was located in the center, stayed there forever. After 15 generations of Supreme Kai's long history and several destructive battles, Supreme Kai's planet was much smaller than when Ayaka left. Looking at the shrinking Supreme Kai's planet, Ayaka even secretly speculated that after a few more battles, Supreme Kai's planet should completely disappear. Of course, this was impossible to happen. Not to mention that the powerful Supreme Kai's planet had a nourishment effect on Supreme Kai, but from another perspective, the importance of Supreme Kai's planet to the universe was self-evident. Even if Supreme Kai's planet really disappeared one day, under the adjustment of the universe mechanics, a new Supreme Kai's planet would evolve again, and it was huge. Old Kai was a little dumbfounded. Wasn't this his base camp, Supreme Kai's planet? This was the place Ayaka wanted to go to. Previously, Ayaka had said that she wanted to take them to a place. Out of trust in her, he had agreed to it without even thinking about it. However, he had never expected that Ayaka would actually bring them here. Kibito shouted in surprise, "Lord Old Kai, this is Supreme Kai's planet." It was no wonder he had such doubts. One had to know that this was the highest level of Supreme Kai's planet in the universe. Even the Grand Kai of the major galaxy could not arrive here. As a mortal, Ayaka could actually bring them here. It is indeed the Supreme Kai's planet. Although the old god was puzzled, how could he not know the Supreme Kai's planet? He was full of doubts in his heart. At this time, he had already begun to suspect that Ayaka was related to Supreme Kai. However, such a person should be very famous, but they, the Supreme Kai, had never seen her before. The old Kai's thoughts inevitably began to become chaotic, and he was more and more unable to figure out the other person. After a short pause, the old Kai woke up, and Ayaka, who had long noticed the change in his expression, also revealed a smile on her perfect face at this moment. "Supreme Kai's planet, you live here. Come with me now." Then he turned around and walked lightly in a direction. Old Kai quickly followed her. He was very familiar with the grass and trees on Supreme Kai's planet, and the direction where Ayaka was now was where the ancient divine sword was buried. Was she going to take old Kai's divine sword? Soon, they came to a towering stone pillar. Compared to the ancient times, this mountain cliff became taller and thinner. In fact, it was because the surrounding rock layers were cut off. The old Kai's expression changed. It really is old Kai's divine sword. Old Kai's divine sword was a sacred item passed down from ancient times. It was sealed at the top of the cliff by a powerful energy. Their divine powers were limited, and they were unable to pull out the divine sword. Ayaka had brought them here. Could it be that he wanted to pull out old Kai's divine sword? However, they saw Ayaka leap lightly, turning into a beam of light that had already arrived at the top of the stone pillar. The old Kai and Kibito also flew up. On the towering cliff, the entire old Kai divine sword was inserted into the rock layer at the top of the cliff. Only the hilt of the sword was exposed outside. The wider cliff in ancient times was now only a few square meters. This was all thanks to the divine power that was left behind at that time. Otherwise, not even a piece of stone would be left behind. Squatting down and touching the exposed sword hilt, Ayaka's next words stunned old Kai. In ancient times before the 15th generation of the old Kai, there was a demon who could rival the Majin Buu. Of course, I am not referring to the current fatty Majin Buu. Benito is terrifying. At that time, several Supreme Kai were killed one after another, and the entire universe fell into chaos. Ayaka said slowly, as if he was recalling the past. At that time, several Supreme Kai were killed one after another, and the entire universe fell into chaos. After that, although Benito was defeated, Old Kai and Supreme Kai's planet were almost destroyed. Yes, the current Supreme Kai's planet is not even 1/10 of what it was before. He then pointed at old Kai's divine sword. At that time, the old Kai was sealed in this sword. For various reasons, I left the divine sword here. When Ayaka finished speaking, the old Kai and Kibito were completely dumbfounded. The old Kai. He thought that Ayaka's identity was very mysterious, but he did not expect that the other party would be the old Kai from the 15th generation. At this moment, the old Kai was a little embarrassed. He did not know how to face this old senior, who suddenly appeared so young and beautiful. The gods in the Dragon Ball World were of a strict hierarchy. The gods and Kai were not insurmountable at all, let alone the great old Kai from the 15th generation. Even the ordinary gods of the previous generation of old Kai were seniors. They had to be carefully served. However, there had never been a situation where the gods of the previous generation of old Kai were in the same generation. After all, the new generation of old Kai only appeared after the last generation of old Kai died. The expression of the old Kai constantly changed. He swallowed his saliva, and then his expression was nervous and he stammered, "Lord no, Senior Old Kai, you are saying that this divine sword is sealed by the old Kai from the 15th generation?" Ayaka nodded, holding the hilt of the sword with one hand and gently pulling it out. With a light cry, old Kai's divine sword broke out of the ground. The divine sword was worthy of being called a divine sword. It had been buried underground for so long, and the blade was still shining with a snow-white cold light. It was extremely sharp. She held the sword horizontally, and then in front of old Kai's fiery eyes, Ayaka's fair hand grabbed the two ends of the divine sword and gently twisted it. Ding! With a light cry, old Kai's divine sword broke into two. Hell, in the boundless and desolate continent, at the junction of several continents in the deepest part of the continent, the blood pools within a radius of 1,000,000 miles converged together, and blood rivers of varying thickness spread from here, transporting the blood liquid to every corner of hell. The intersection of the blood pools was even more desolate. The soil at the end of the continent was a terrifying dark color. Above the blood pool, the energy of the otherworld killer gathered here. The energy drew, and from time to time, it blew a spiritual storm that made the soul tremble. Deep, sad, and empty. In the depths of 10,000 meters below the blood pool, the deep darkness had no color. Plop, plop. It was like the beating of a heart. A giant blood sphere that was shaped like a heart was vibrating rhythmically as it swelled and contracted. Countless small tentacles of varying thickness extended out from the surroundings, continuously absorbing the otherworld energy from the blood pond. As if endless years had passed, the blood sphere grew larger and larger, and the energy it absorbed also became more and more. Finally, the blood pond began to boil. All the blood rivers in the entire hell seemed to tremble along with the blood vessels that covered the human body. Dark clouds covered the sky, violent winds raged, and streaks of blood-colored sparkling lightning pierced through the clouds. The hell fell into a strange darkness. The sea of blood began to surge violently. Huge waves slapped against each other, and waves of rumbling resounded through the sky. The blood sphere that was shaped like a heart slowly rose, floating over 100 meters above the sea of blood. Boom! The ball of blood exploded, and the terrifying aura of the end of the world enveloped the entire hell. All the ghosts in hell trembled. It was a torture from the soul. After the ball of blood disappeared, a man with a cold expression appeared in his original position. He had dark red hair, bronze skin, and strong muscles. A dark red pattern that was as complex as the stars gathered on his forehead. Such an earth-shattering appearance, strange astronomical phenomena, and complex labels all showed that the other party was not simple. Suddenly, the man clenched his fists and roared. His rough voice immediately echoed in the hell. Under the impact of the sound waves, the space began to collapse. In the outer area that was still controlled by the underworld, endless evil thoughts rushed over. By the time the staff of the underworld noticed it, it was already irreparable. With a few popping sounds, a short and fat figure was born. Janemba, Janemba. The pale figure shook his head and scratched. He looked around foolishly and then happily made trouble everywhere. Ayaka did not know anything about what had happened in hell. Unknowingly, two extremely terrifying fellows had appeared. One was a red-haired man born from the sea of blood in hell, and the other was an evil spirit wave that gathered evil energy. Because they had just been born, their destruction of the universe had not yet been reflected, but it would soon cause turmoil. In the holy land of the universe, the old Kai looked at the skinny old man who had come out of the divine sword in pleasant surprise. He was the old Kai from 15 generations ago. The old Kai had a hunched back and an old dragon clock. Even with the long life of the old Kai, after being sealed for so long, he still revealed an aged appearance, let alone the old Kai who had once fused with the old witch. He already had an old appearance. Senior Old Kai. Old Kai was respectful from the bottom of his heart. Speaking of which, as the Old Kai, Ayaka's status was even more distinguished. However, her delicate and pretty appearance made it difficult for her to look like an elder. Senior Old Kai still felt a bit uncomfortable in his heart. On the other hand, Old Kai's old appearance was more amiable and had the demeanor of an elder. Of course, he did not know that the other party was actually a perverted old man like Master Rashi. Senior Old Kai nodded his head in satisfaction. Just as he was about to say a few words of encouragement to the younger generation, he noticed the young girl standing beside Old Kai. His body immediately trembled and he hurriedly walked forward. "You are Ayaka. You haven't changed at all after so many years. Well, you are already the Old Kai. So many years have passed. I didn't expect to see you again in the future." Ayaka smiled slightly and said, "Congratulations on breaking the seal. Demon Benito has been killed by me." It can be considered as an explanation to Senior Old Kai. After Senior Old Kai heard this, he nodded repeatedly, and his mood returned to the time when Benito was in chaos. Countless years had passed since he was sealed. He had thought that he was the only one left in that period of time. He did not expect to see his old acquaintance many years later. He could not help but sigh in his heart, as if it were for a lifetime ago. Old Kai listened carefully to the Senior Old Kai talk about the past. Although he had heard it once, from the Senior Old Kai's mouth, he was more aware of the crisis at that time. He could not help but think of the despair he felt when he faced the Majin Buu. "Senior Old Kai, in fact, there is also a demon now. Other than me, Kai was all killed by Majin Buu. Thanks to the help of Ayaka, Majin Buu was subdued." Senior Old Kai sighed. "Although I am sealed in the divine sword, I am very clear about the matters of the outside world. That Majin Buu is indeed terrifying. It is no wonder that Old Kai is unable to deal with him. However, compared to the ancient Benito, Majin Buu is still a bit lacking." "Ancient Benito is that strong?" Old Kai was shocked. Kibito listened carefully. Majin Buu was already so invincible. How strong was Demon Benito, who was even stronger than him? Thinking about how even Majin Buu was not a match for Old Kai, plus the ancient Benito, he had a deep understanding of Ayaka's strength. Senior Old Kai nodded heavily. "I always thought that the one who could pull out the divine sword would be some supreme Kai, but after waiting for so long, no one pulled out the divine sword. The one who pulled out the divine sword in the end was actually Ayaka." Although Senior Old Kai had no intention of blaming him, when Old Kai heard this, his face still felt hot and he felt ashamed in his heart. Old Kai really hadn't appeared in a long time. Earth, Corinne Tower. Two beams of light shot out from the ground. They continued to rise along Corinne Tower, quickly passing through the layers of clouds and mist, flying towards a higher space. These two people were Son Gohan and Videl. After subduing the Majin Buu, Son Gohan had time to teach Videl martial arts. After a long time, coupled with Satan's continuous help from the side, their relationship could be said to have progressed rapidly, and they agreed to go to the lookout together. Videl had never even gone up to Korin Tower, let alone the lookout. It was already a legendary holy land. When Son Gohan mentioned it, she quickly agreed. On this day, Videl was dressed in simpler clothes, and she set off with Son Gohan in more neutral clothes. She put her hand on her forehead to resist the oncoming wind. After they really set off, Videl only knew the height of Korin Tower. After flying for a long time, she still could not see the end of the tower. She could not see the top of Korin Tower at all. Looking at the relaxed Son Gohan next to him, Videl asked, "How high is Korin Tower? Why hasn't he reached the top yet?" "It's about halfway. We will see the top of the tower in a few minutes. The lookout we are going to go to is still above Korin Tower. When the time comes, we will pass through the lightning layer. It is full of lightning. You have to be careful." "There is lightning?" Videl was shocked. Once a mortal was hit by lightning, he would die instantly. "Don't worry. That lightning is just a test. It won't hurt people's lives." Son Gohan smiled confidently. He held Videl's hand and accelerated. The strong wind in front of them suddenly became fierce, forming two twisted wings behind them. Videl didn't reject Son Gohan holding her little hand at all. Her lips were slightly open, and a smile appeared on her delicate face. Since she met Son Gohan, she felt that her life suddenly became colorful. Whoosh! 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 The two of them continued to fly. They passed over Korin Tower's head and continued upwards. The air in the upper levels became thinner. A few dark clouds gradually covered the sky. Sparkling and translucent flashes pierced through the clouds. From time to time, deafening roars would ring out in their ears. In the midst of the thunder and lightning, Son Gohan continued to rise while carrying Videl. As they passed through the layer of lightning, the sky suddenly lit up and the blue sky reappeared. Above the pure white clouds, a crimson hemispherical lookout floated motionlessly. "That's the lookout!" cried Videl as she pointed at the majestic lookout. "That's right." After arriving at the Divine Hall, Son Gohan met Hongye and the others there. Son Gohan greeted them. "Aunt Hongye, cousin." Even Videl knew that they were Son Gohan's relatives and were the most famous people on Earth, so she was a little cautious. Hongye smiled and looked at Son Gohan and the other two suggestively. She clicked her tongue. Son Gohan's face was not very thick. He suddenly became embarrassed. He did not see Majin Buu around. He could not help but ask, "Where is Majin Buu?" "Oh, that fat guy was tired of staying in the Divine Hall. He insisted on going down to the lower realm, so I agreed," Hongye said indifferently. Son Gohan was shocked and said with a strange expression, "The evil in the Majin Buu's body has not been expelled. Aren't you afraid of causing a disturbance if you let him go to the lower realm?" "It's fine. Mr. Popo has been watching the lookout. If he dares to mess around, I will stop him." Only then did Son Gohan feel relieved. After Ayaka and Old Kai went to Supreme Kai's planet, Bardock left Earth with Son Goku because he missed his eldest son, Raditz, who he hadn't seen for many years. Although Bardock didn't pay much attention to his two sons in the past, there were only a few Saiyan people now, so he was somewhat human. Not long after Son Goku left, Krillin and the others also left one after another, and the Divine Hall suddenly returned to its former silence. In the empty Divine Hall, other than Dend and Mr. Popo, only Hongye and Iam were left. Smiling as he bid farewell to Hongye, Son Goku began to browse the Divine Hall with Videl. Perhaps because it was the first time he came to the Divine Hall, he felt that everything he saw was very novel. Her line of sight swept past the dazzling door and landed on the white jade inlaid with gold murals on both sides of the corridor. The soaring totems seemed to have been carefully carved. The lines were smooth and vivid as they attached themselves to the white jade stone wall. Everything was dignified and solemn, as if it were for a dream. She took a deep breath, held Son Goku's arm, and leaned over slightly. Son Goku suddenly shivered, and his expression became bright. He even introduced the matters of the temple to her in a good mood. In a small town near the suburbs, it was late autumn. The withered and yellow leaves began to leave the branches. The vegetation was also slightly sparse. When the wind blew, it brought the yellow sand to brush against the earth. The sand was not big, and it did not cover one sight. For an inland town far away from the sea, because of the sparse water, sandstorms often occurred. There was only one road in the town that connected to the outside world, and there were small bare rocks on both sides of the road. At this time, a fat and short figure was leisurely strolling on the road. He carried a large package on his back, and in his hand was a pack of torn and sealed snacks. Zizizi, he constantly stuffed the potato chips in the bag into his mouth. Kacha, Kacha, Majin Buu kept chewing. Soon, he finished a bag of potato chips. He licked his fingers, threw the bag away, and took out another bag from his backpack. The large bag on his body was full of snacks. Of course, these were not bought by Majin Buu. They were taken by sheep when passing by the snack shop. Speaking of which, it was very rare for Majin Buu to stop killing people. If he wanted to buy things normally, it would be easier to destroy the earth. However, he was addicted to eating. Every time he passed by a city, he would bring a lot of them. In the end, he even used his backpack. This was very hard for Mr. Popo. Every time he saw Majin Buu enter the city, he was on tenterhooks. He was afraid that some ignorant people would anger Majin Buu. Woo! A stray dog ran to Majin Buu. It let out a low growl when it smelled the delicious fragrance. Majin Buu looked at the stray dog. His eyes were wide open. He licked his fingers and pointed at the beef jerky in his hand. Then, he reluctantly handed over a piece of the year jerky. Woo, I'll give you one. Woof. The stray dog cried happily and ate the beef jerky in one bite. Then, it gently rubbed its head against the leg of Majin Buu, making a whining sound. Majin Buu narrowed his eyes. His round head was steaming, and he happily ran east to play with the stray dog. Mr. Popo stood at the edge of the temple and rubbed his eyes. Den walked over and asked nervously, "Is there anything wrong with Majin Buu?" Mr. Popo nodded, "No, he is playing with a puppy." It is hard to imagine. According to old Kai, Majin Buu should be inhuman. Let's not worry about this issue for now. As long as Majin Buu doesn't cause any trouble, it's fine. Dende said with a smile. He was very nervous to have such a guy who was even more terrifying than a time bomb on Earth. After instructing Mr. Popo to continue monitoring Majin Buu's actions, Den walked away with a face full of worries. A few hours passed quickly. Majin Buu and the stray dog became very close. At this moment, they were sitting on a rock and eating snacks. The big bag of snacks disappeared not long after. At this moment, a low cry came from afar, and a pale figure entered their sight. The stray dog immediately barked, and Majin Buu also stood up. Janemba, Janemba. The voice that was even more idiotic than Majin Buu's continued to echo, and the similarly fat Janemba appeared in front of Majin Buu. After seeing Majin Buu, Janemba stared at him with his simple and honest eyes. He clapped his hands and ran over in joy. His speed was so fast that it seemed to surpass lightning. In an instant, a blurry figure flashed. Janemba had already arrived in front of Majin Buu. Seeing the guy who suddenly appeared, Majin Buu's eyes widened, and his face sank. Although he was unable to determine the identity of the other party, looking at the thick and solid evil ki around his body made him feel a little afraid. Sure enough, after Janemba ran in front of Majin Buu, he did not say anything and directly punched his belly. With the huge force, his round body was like a bowling ball, and he was knocked back. When Janembeo saw this, he happily clapped his hands and shouted, "Janemba, Janemba." Majin Buu, who was suddenly sent flying, suddenly became angry. The evil thoughts in his heart suddenly occupied the upper hand. He roared and rushed towards Janemba. Bang! The two fat men held each other's palms. Sparks flew in their eyes. The earth trembled and a terrifying aura erupted instantly. Boom! 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 A huge pit suddenly appeared in the ground, and 100 meters was forcefully crushed down. As the strength of the two continued to increase, the area of collapse continued to expand. 200 meters, 300 meters. The earth let out a low wail, and a powerful aura enveloped the entire world. The dragon warriors who were scattered all over the world sensed the powerful aura that erupted here, and their expressions changed. It's the aura of the Majin Buu. He's actually angered. Who is the person fighting him? Krillin lay on the soft chair with his daughter in his arms. Sensing the battle happening on the other side of the world, his entire body bounced up. In the headquarters of the all-purpose capsule, a trace of surprise flashed across Vegeta's stiff face. Interesting, how can I be missing in this kind of battle? As he spoke, he turned into a ray of light and flew in the direction of Majin Buu. In the lookout, Honya's expression had not been good ever since she sensed the aura coming from the lower realm. Damn it, who exactly angered Majin Buu? The other party's ki is even more evil than Majin Buu, and his strength is no worse than that of Fat Buu. I said seriously. At this time, Son Gohan also ran over, and his face was not very good. Because of this sudden incident, the wonderful atmosphere that he and Videl had a hard time clashing with was suddenly blown away. Videl, you stay in the Divine Hall. Aunt Honya and I will go and check it out, he said angrily. Gohan, you have to be careful. Videl's face was pale, but he was frightened by the anger of the Majin Buu and Janemba. Don't worry. Son Gohan, Honya, and I jumped off the temple and plunged into the clouds. The Launch Sisters and the 18 Android Sisters looked at each other and also set off. Other than Honya, Vegeta, and the other Saiyan, Piccolo and Krillin also rushed in the direction of Majin Buu. Although they knew that this kind of battle was not something they could intervene in, it was impossible for them to stay where they were and wait for death. The places where Majin Buu and Janemba twisted had become riddled with holes. Huge mushroom clouds that were like nuclear bombs rose one after another, and a large amount of soil was thrown into the air. In the blink of an eye, it was turned into steam by the powerful energy. Ka! Majin Buu kicked Janemba, sending him flying. Then, he pulled out a lump of fat from his belly and threw it a few times like a noodle. Then, he grabbed Janemba's neck. At this time, the characteristics of the demon took effect. The fat meat seemed to have life. It extended continuously like rubber and soon enveloped Janemba. Even a guy like you wants to bully me. I won't do it. Majin Buu glared and said viciously. However, Majin Buu still underestimated the ability of Janemba. His body, which was tightly bound by glue, quickly disintegrated and disappeared like a bubble, and reappeared not far away. Majin Buu became even angrier, and jumped 2 times on the spot and rushed towards Janemba. Janemba saw Majin Buu rushing over, and shouted Janemba loudly. His face was full of excitement, and a trace of disgusting saliva leaked out of the corner of his mouth. His body flashed, but he rushed over. Janemba's original body was formed from the gathered evil energy of hell. He could break himself into countless particles at any time and reorganize himself in another place. This kind of characteristic made it even more difficult for people to attack. When the two fat men collided, Majin Buu quickly tasted pain. Pa! A heavy punch carried 1,000 Jun of force and smashed into the ground. With a loud bang, the continental plate broke. Seeing that the attack failed, Majin Buu snorted and was about to attack again. Unexpectedly, Janemba was very strange and unexpectedly powerful. Countless tentacles suddenly stretched out from the dark and trapped Majin Buu in an instant. The pale shadow seemed to be separated by a layer of fog. His soulless eyes looked at Majin Buu and immediately burst out with a wrinkled light. Hee, Janemba, he proudly clapped his hands and his bloated body jumped up and down. His belly, which was as bright as a water ball, trembled. Goo! His stomach let out a low growl. He was hungry. Janemba touched his stomach, saliva flowing out from his mouth. He opened his mouth and bit down on Majin Buu's arm. After that, he bit down on a piece of meat. For Janemba, who was covered in evil energy, Majin Buu's meat was the biggest tonic. Majin Buu felt pain. His face trembled. His anger had accumulated to the extreme. Puff! Waves of hot steam sprayed out from the small hole in his skin. At this time, the heat was like the surface of the sun. Janemba could not help but take a step back under the influence of the heat. However, after tasting the demon's taste, he could not resist his instinctive urge and pounced once again. Ah! Boundless energy gushed out, and Majin Buu broke free from the restraints of the tentacles. His simple and honest face was covered with blue veins, and his two vertical eyes were completely lost.